Hi there, welcome back to the Connected Classroom. My name is Rusty May. I'm a school counselor by trade. We've been doing this show since about the middle of March when the pandemic hit, talking about how to effectively connect with kids in the virtual classroom as well as in the concrete classroom. I've spent the last 17 years of my career working from a distance, working with teachers and trying to help them create effective educational relationships with all their students, and have been doing this show ever since the pandemic started to try to help educators kind of come to grips with what to expect, not only last spring when we had to do this on the fly, but now with the fall coming up and thinking about all the challenges that we're going to be facing going forward. So thank you for those of you that are with me here today. I'm going to open up your mic and have you introduce yourself if you'd like to. Just tell us why you're here. Hey, Teddy G, thanks for being here again.
Hey, Rusty, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are things in your neck of the woods?
Pretty good. We recently was told by Governor Cuomo of the state of New York that if the infection rate goes up to 3%, that we're going to go back to either remote learn or have a hybrid style. So that's a good sign that at least they're taking the necessary precautions. As for things on my end, we're still in the preparations of the student genesee or restart plan. I guess I'll introduce myself as well. For those who don't know, my name is Teddy Jumfie. I'm currently a manager, even an access service manager at Student Geneseo. It's a liberal arts university located upstate New York. So back to what I was saying, things are pretty good for the most part. We're just waiting for the restart to start on August 31st.
Thank you, Teddy. Good to have you as always. Eleanor, would you like to share a little bit about why you're here today? Share about yourself. See if I can get you unmuted.
Now you hear
Go ahead.
me?
Yeah.
I worked at Salisbury University.
Oh, that's right.
I have taught at Salisbury, but now I'm retired or just tired. I am going to be supervising student interns or teacher interns this fall, and I am not sure how to proceed since I won't even see them face to face.
Right.
And they don't know how to proceed because we've had no training, particularly to prepare for this.
Right. Well, I know you've been with us before, so thank you for being with us again. I hope you'll just join in the conversation as we go forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Hillary, would you like to join in? Tell us a little bit about yourself, Hillary.
Hi, I teach in Georgia in the United States and at a small regional university. I'll be teaching a course online, but I also manage our tutoring center. I've got about 25 tutors, and most of our tutoring is going to be done online, which they're really stressed about because we struggled in the spring to get students to participate. I can tell already that my tutors are pretty stressed out and they just want this all to be over and they just want to be back and everything to be back to normal. I can tell our faculty are really stressed out and scared because we're one of the campuses going back face to face. Anyone who has, like me, I have a pre-existing condition, so I'll be working remotely, but we have about 60% of our courses are still going to be face to face, so it's just a really stressful time.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I hope you'll join the conversation as well. I'm going to probably unmute everyone. If we end up with 6 or 7 people, we can talk our way through it, but I'd really like to hear your thoughts as we go forward, Hillary. Thanks for being here. Jay, would you like to join in? Jay Irwin? All right. Maybe Jay's doing something else. Jay, if you want to send us a note in the chat, that'd be great. Kay Bradshaw.
Hi, I'm Karen Bradshaw, and I work for the University of South Alabama in the biomedical library. Okay. So they just opened the biomedical library back up, very limited to students. It's only, they can come in and check out a study room, and once all our study rooms are full, then we don't let any more students in except for maybe printing. I'm still working remotely. I'm in a high risk category as well. So I'm still able to do reference and cataloging and things like that remotely. But I'm concerned that our students are going to start being frustrated with the limited access to the building for studying for boards and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And more importantly, are you guys going to have football? Because I know that that's a big thing right now.
What the SEC? No, I'm not sure if we are because we just built a new stadium that is supposed to, be a big money bringer this year. So, haha,
We'll
that's
see.
not happening.
All right. Thank you, Karen. Thanks for being with us. Katie, you want to join in? Katie?
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
I'm Katie. Good to see you again. I'm a school psychologist in Michigan, and just really appreciate all these opportunities to hear from different perspectives and take in any ways that I can to support our students and staff. We don't know yet, but yeah, whatever we decide, people are going to need help. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Thanks for being with us again.
Yeah, thank you.
Teddy, we talked to Amity. Is it Amity? Amity? All right. How about Susan Powell? Susan, are you there? All right. Well, if you guys want to add something to the chat, please do. We'd love to hear from you as we move forward. As I always say on the Connected Classroom, the mics are open. So I'm going to unmute you all. If you want to jump in, I'd appreciate it if you would raise a hand or do something like that so we can do it. But if you'd like to jump in, please do, because we'd like to hear from you. And that's really what this is all about, is hearing from you guys and finding out what's going on there. Today we're talking about the mental health issues that are going to come. Katie was speaking to that. Regardless of how we go back, there's going to be some issues for all of us in terms of what's next, in terms of what's going to happen next. And we want to talk a little bit about that today, kind of get back on the same page, kind of where the show started back in March when we were thinking about these kinds of things. Obviously from the screen, and this PDF will be available too if you want. You can email me, send me a note in the chat, and I'll send you the PDF. But really what we're thinking about now, and I guess I'm hearing even from Katie and some of the other people, that we really don't even know where we are right now in terms of what the options are going to be, how we're going to go back to school. And so the anxiety levels right now, our friend from the university was talking about that and the challenges with their tutors. I think right now what's really happening more than anything else, at least in my experience in the reading and everything that I've been doing, the anxiety levels are really, really high. And the reason why is because of the unknown. And obviously for most of us, that's one of the more challenging things that we have to deal with, is the unknown, because we don't really, we can't prepare for what we don't know. All right, so Karen, you asked for the slides. Absolutely. Appreciate that. I will send those to you for sure. So what we're talking about here in terms of what's going on, because we've heard from so many people, whether it's in the political arena, the medical arena, the psychology arena, everyone is saying the importance of getting kids back to school and getting parents back to work. And I don't think any of us can really argue with that. The reality of that, obviously from our different perspectives from around the places that whether we're in Georgia, whether we're in Alabama, whether we're in Detroit, whether we're in New York, it's different based on, kind of what we're hearing about how the pandemic is moving forward and what we should be thinking about. But I think one of the things that someone mentioned in the introduction that's really important is just the sheer overwhelming nature that's happening. Everybody's getting tired of this. Whatever this is, people are getting tired of it. And I think what's going to happen as a result of that, and what we're starting to notice, whether it's in schools, we saw it in the early opening in the Indiana schools and some of the southern schools as well, where kids were simply just ignoring the protocols that they were being asked to follow. So this is going to be a challenge for us as educators, is really understanding where we are and understanding what our motivation is in this regard, in terms of thinking about in the best interest of, because this is not we're not in the military. We're not in first line defenders, whether it's the medical industry or the fire industry or any of those things. But teachers are now, I've been hearing a lot from educators who are saying, you know, in March, I was the most beloved person in my town. And now people are yelling at me and telling me that I need to get back to work. So if any of you have your mic open right now, want to share with us a little bit about your thoughts in that regard. How have things changed since March in terms of the way people are responding to you? Anyone? Has anyone noticed that at all in terms of the change in the perception of the teachers? All right, we'll keep moving on then. Like I said, love to have you participate. If you want to join in, please do. From our perspective, what's important right now is the idea of the safe and empowered teachers. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the mics then. If people want to jump in, please do so. Just raise your hand and we'll come to you, and we'll be able to do it that way as opposed to leaving it open right now. But from the Connected Classrooms perspective, we're concerned about the teachers and the educators feeling empowered and safe enough to do their job. And then also understanding the community engagement that needs to be done because of the fact that there are so many people that need to get back to work. And these are realities that we have to deal with. But the bigger concerns from the perspective of this show and from the perspective of a lot of you out there are, you know, what's the basic way to support the students, whether they're in higher education, whether they're tutors that are working for us. What's the best way for us to be able to handle and manage the people that we're working with? And I think that it's been, and we'll talk about this, we have a slide later in the show talking about the need for us to be able to take care of ourselves. But as that anxiety and that not knowing continues for another couple weeks until we get into it, I think it's very difficult for all of us to really take care of ourselves and to begin to feel like that we understand what our role is going to be. And that part of it is causing so much stress and anxiety that I think what we just saw in New Jersey the other day, I don't know if you noticed, New Jersey's governor had said they were going to open up the state schools and that everybody were required to do that. And one of their largest districts just announced that 350 teachers had signed a petition that said they refused to go back to work. So the district has said that we simply won't be able to do that. We won't be able to go back to work at this time. They're going to start online because teachers are, you know, really feeling like that they aren't able to protect themselves, and so therefore they're saying that they wouldn't want to go back into school. And so I'm reading from Karen talking about people who are supportive of teachers and parents are making difficult decisions to send their children to school. I think that's really happening. And one of the things that's really important to remember about this is the disparity between the haves and the have-nots when it comes down to the economic reality of what we're talking about. We're seeing more and more pandemic pods coming about where parents of means are bringing in an educator or a tutor or even a teacher in some situations to provide education in small groups for kids in their neighborhoods. We're seeing more and more of that reality where the economic divide is becoming a bigger issue in terms of just the needs of the students in their school and the fact that the parents aren't able to provide those kinds of things. But it's really important to understand that the tide is turning just a little bit. Eleanor was talking, she's hearing mostly from teachers, and that remote learning requires much more work for the teachers. I think one of the big things, Eleanor, there that we need to be aware of and we need to be talking with about our educators as well as our administrators is the hybrid model, which is if you're going to have the kids for 2 days and then they're going to be home for 3 days, the workload is absolutely doubled for the teachers because of the fact that they're going to have to create face-to-face learning plans as well as online learning plans. And they're not going to have any additional support. And a lot of times, not even the teacher's aides that we've had in the past. And so again, the emphasis and the weight of all of this is being put on to the teachers. And so for me, I think what's happening is we're starting to see the teachers taking a step back and saying, this is too much. This is really too much to ask. And how are we supposed to be able to do this? and be able to take care of ourselves and our families as we go through this. And I think that's an excellent point. So Heidi's saying that she thinks that the judgments are still in suspension, not feeling a lot of resentment from the community, although I know that there's been a few complaints. Online learning is still immature. We have lots of creative ideas. I think that's an exciting part of this, Heidi, is really to think about how many. We do have a lot of teachers who are really embracing this, as are a lot of children. A lot of children who weren't that excited about the actual face-to-face learning environment are now starting to really engage in the online learning environment. And we have a lot of teachers who have technology backgrounds or who now are getting familiar with technology, who are creating fantastic systems. And I think as we come out of this in the next year or two, that the entire public education or education system as a whole is going to be changed because of this. And I love that attitude, Heidi, and thinking in terms of all of us really seeing it as an opportunity. And I think that's important as we're getting back together with our kids, whether it's online or in person, that we're using future speak and that we're talking to people directly and letting them know that, you know, we're in a powerful place. We feel good about what we're doing. We're educators. We're going to take this responsibility, but also at the same time, taking responsibility for yourself first. Hillary's mentioning the fact that some people are supportive, others are angry. Obviously, I think that has to do with your state of your situation. If you can't work remotely, or if you are working remotely and you have 3 or 4 kids, you don't have anyone to take care of it. My wife and I have 2 kids, 5 and 4. My kids right now are watching television so that I can do my show, because we have a situation we're actually traveling, and so we don't have our normal routine set up. And so you get that, and I think it's really important as educators to as I always talk to educators about not taking things personally. It's even more important to think about that now, because this is not personal. It's personal for them. I mean, obviously the parents are like, well, I need to go to work, or I need my kid out of the house, or my kid needs socialization. I get it. But when they're making these kinds of comments, and to not take them personally, it's really challenging. And that's another thing that we have to continually work on, not only with ourselves, but with the staff that we work with, to continue to remind them that what's coming at us are personal needs and personal ideas, and even maybe even personal beliefs that don't think, that a lot of people aren't thinking. They're thinking differently about masks or about social distancing and so forth. So it's really interesting to see that, and it's going to be a challenge for educators. And I think the most important thing for us, which we're going to talk about here in a minute, is the idea that we really focus on what's important right now, and that's taking care of ourselves and taking care of our students, because nothing else is more important than that. And developing a way to effectively prepare them, to help them prepare for what's next, that's going to be really, really important as we move forward in this regard, and thinking about some of the things on this slide, and encouraging students to find new ways to learn, find new ways to engage, find new ways to create and use their mind. Because a lot of what we've been seeing in the past, and a lot of what the educational experts are saying right now in terms of what we need to be doing going forward, is less is more, talking less, doing less kind of instruction things, doing more independent learning kinds of things, helping students to embrace this new opportunity. And to be able to do that effectively is going to be something that's going to be a challenge for all of us as we continue to move through this. Heidi mentions again, thinking about great ideas in social media platforms, built-in design response to social interactions, results for good behavior. I think that's something, Heidi, it's going to be really challenging this year, especially in the face-to-face environment, is dealing with off-task behaviors, especially when it comes to things like social distancing and masks. Online, with the online platforms, I think that's probably going to be easier to do, because you're not going to have the same kind of restrictions. But the face-to-face reality of this, and that's another thing that we're all dealing with, is what if I'm an online teacher, or I've been given the opportunity to teach online because I'm in an at-risk community, I have a completely different feeling about this coming year, as if I've been told, like by the state of New Jersey, that no matter what, I have to be in class teaching in order for me to maintain my job. And so that's something that, as educators, I think we have to be empathetic of the entire gamut of opportunities that are out there, and the entire gamut of differences that we're all facing, because you know, we really don't know what the other person is going through. We really don't know whether or not they have a similar situation that we do, or if, you know, they're dealing with something else. So we're talking about getting more in community engagement. We need a conversation around this. Obviously, schools have become, and teachers have become, a much more understood, amazing resource for what we provide and the services that we provide, but we need to engage the community in this. And as a group, as a staff, engaging the community, engaging the business owners, engaging the daycare community, and engaging the after-school community in terms of understanding what we all need to be doing in order for our kids and for our parents to get what they need is absolutely critical. So see, these are some of the ideas that we've been talking about over the last 6 months. Again, thank you for using the chat box. If you have any comments, please continue to do that. Today, we wanted to talk about the mental health issues as we go into the new year, because we are going to be, from all accounts, we are going to be dealing with some significant mental health issues, whether it's a pre-existing condition, the kids that we knew that we were dealing with before the close down happened, to the kids who seemingly were okay when all this happened. But, oh, Teddy's raised a hand. Let me get back to you, Teddy. Can you unmute yourself, Teddy? Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so about the mental health issue, I think that's going to be a really big concern come the fall semester. Prior to one of the questions you had asked earlier, I think one of the issues that I'm dealing with is getting tested. A lot of employees, organizations, companies are asking their employers to get tested, but in certain areas, either testing is not free or is inadequate, and that's become a big problem. I had a conversation with two of my colleagues earlier this morning prior to coming into work, and we all had come to agreement that we want to get tested, but we prefer not to pay out of pocket.
How much does it cost?
It's not cheap. I think for the antibodies, about $140, and to get the COVID tested, if your insurance doesn't cover it, it's about $150. But I live in New York State, so I'm not sure. But it may vary in other states, but I know in New York State it's not cheap.
Okay. And that, so your point being is that that's leading to a lot of anxiety and nervousness within the staff?
Yeah, already. Well, prior to last week's meeting with you, I was informed that students have to get tested upon their arrival back to campus. So if you're a student who lives in New York City, chances are you may likely get tested there because it's ample amount of testing. But if you live in a more rural area where the COVID cases are really low, testing might not be available. So where does that leave you? Do you have to commute hours away? Were you able to get it done quickly? And for some places, testing has been delayed due to the amount of testing. Other places, you can get tested done rapidly and have the results given to you within 3 hours.
Okay. But in terms of what we've been seeing recently, and again, we saw this with the governor that was supposed to meet with President Trump, who tested positive with a quick response test and then went back to his, I think it was Ohio, and actually tested negative twice with the longer term blood test that takes a lot longer. So I'm not sure people are even convinced that the testing, depending on the nature of the testing, is something that's going to be effective. But if you're saying that if the students come back to campus and then they're tested, does that mean that they have to stay on campus then? They're not allowed to go off campus?
Well, that's the other issue. So if you work at a university like I do and you get tested prior to coming back, that's the test that you're given to university before August 31st. Now, what happens after that, no one knows. So if you test negative, and let's say, okay, it's Friday, I'm going out, I'm going to meet up with some friends, I come back Monday, and you haven't gotten tested since then, you may be walking around with the virus and no one will know about it because you haven't gotten tested, and the school isn't providing testing. Where does that leave you? Same thing with the staff and faculty and teachers. If we're not getting tested on a bi-weekly, weekly basis or every couple of days, where does that leave us as well? Yes, I think the policies, the procedures, the precautions of wearing face covering, practice social distancing is great, but people can be asymptomatic. People could have pre-health existing conditions and still have the virus.
Yeah, I don't think there's no easy way to do this. And I think obviously for all of us, you know, going back into that environment, But I also think that what we talked about earlier, and it's important to remember that the burnout rate, especially with young people, and we've seen that in the upsurge and the uptick of cases in the United States, trying to get a 20 or 21-year-old to not go out on a Friday night is a bit of a challenge. And you also, I've got aunts and uncles that are in their 80s who have grandchildren that they haven't seen in 6 months, and part of me just scratches my head and says, you know, what's the use then, right? You know, I mean, if this is going to be a part of the future and we're going to have to deal with this, if a virus, if a vaccine isn't on the horizon, and this is something that we have to just kind of get used to going forward. But again, we don't know that, and I think that's part of the frustration for educators as well as parents and everything else, is that we just don't know where this is going to go. And the problem that we have is that even if you get tested, how long does that last? If you have antibodies, there's research out there that says that that's a good thing, and research out there that says that maybe it only lasts for 3 or 4 weeks and then it doesn't provide any protection. So again, right now, the lack of information is making it very difficult, all of which brings me to the point of saying, you know, the do-over year, or the looping year that we've been talking about on the show for the last couple of years, where everybody just kind of takes this as a lost academic year, and that we work together to continue to try to find solutions, to find vaccines, to do that sort of thing, that we come together as a community to not rush into, you know, the education process. I don't know where everyone's going or what the speed of that needs to be, but I think right now everybody wants to get through this, and that's a very difficult place to be. If you can remember being a senior in high school or a senior in college and having that March and April feeling where graduation was never going to come. And I think we're all at that place right now, where we're feeling like this needs to be done, it needs to be over with, but it's not. And so what we want to talk about today are some ways that we can protect ourselves. Please keep your chat line open, keep thinking, bringing the questions in. Hillary reminds us that the unknown is the main driver for stress, and I think that's one of the things that's happening more than anything right now, is the stress and the anxiety, and not only in ourselves, but we're going to see it in our students. And if our students are coming to us face to face, that's going to be a very difficult challenge. And even if you're in higher education, my firm belief is that connection before content, at least right now, more so than ever, has to be the priority in terms of how do we get back to some comfortable level of coexisting and trusting each other. But some of the things that are on your screen right now, trying to find the uplifting moments. I appreciate Heidi. Heidi keeps bringing some positives into our chat line. I bet she's a very positive teacher. Finding positive moments, uplifting moments, things that are going on. I mean, we're seeing some real positives in the sports world. I know I was teasing with Karen, I think it was Karen, about the SEC not going back. But Eleanor, did you have
Trying to
something?
wake up the dead?
Yeah, that's how you feel.
Good. He's in there.
Come in, Mr. S. Hello there. No, he's not here, it's just me.
I think we had everybody off the mute there for a second. But if we're thinking about some of these things, you know, finding the uplifting moments, I mean, obviously in the sports world, we've seen some positives, and the National Hockey League seems to be okay. The Major League Soccer League was able to bring their tournament back. We can talk about that, especially with the older students that we're dealing with who are losing sports. We're thinking about losing until the spring and not having the opportunity to do what they love to do. Being able to talk in that futuristic talk, and being able to help them to focus on the fact that this is going to, at some point we're going to get through this, and at some point we're going to figure out how to make this work, helping them set goals and moving forward, and also being really okay with the idea of setting boundaries. I know a lot of educators right now are very interested in trying to provide open office hours as often as they can, so that they can be there for every student in every situation. But I think it's really important that we give ourselves a break, and we continue to communicate with each student, continue to find out what their needs are, and adjusting our schedule accordingly. But we have to be able to set boundaries for ourselves, because self-care right now, as we go through the stress and anxiety, is absolutely critical. So the students are watching us to see what we're doing. They're watching us to see how we're behaving in this kind of an environment. And it's really important that we understand that they are looking at us and seeing how we're going to deal with these things. So Heidi joined in again. We're in a tough situation. Teach online effectively as in person with little training. I think that's one of the things that a lot of teachers have dealt with, is the idea of trying to be perfect. Heidi, if you would agree with me there, and I think that that right now it's more, and you mentioned the idea of connection before content. It's more about being okay with failure. Like, I've been doing this show since March, and I make mistakes all the time. Teddy's been with me almost every show and can attest to the fact that I'll forget to turn my recording on, or I'll make a mistake, or I'll forget how to use the buttons in Zoom. But right now, it's really important that we just be ourselves, because this is not the perfect educator, and they don't need us to be perfect. They need us to be okay, and they need us to be okay with making mistakes. They need us to see us being human. They need to see us feeling things. They need to see us scared and anxious and stressed. And we need to be talking with them about it, because it's important, and it will come out sideways in other aspects of our lives. You know, my son had a one of those little airsoft guns. One of the kids that we're traveling with had an airsoft gun. My son found a plastic, it looked like a spear, and stuck it in the airsoft gun, and came into the kitchen, pointed it at me, and fired it. And I turned around like I was going to get shot by a spear directly through my body, because this is a hard plastic thing that he had stuck in there. And fortunately for me, it didn't come out. But I definitely, my voice was very angry when I got done, because fear lives right next door to anger. And so if you're scared and you have a lot of anxiety and you're feeling that, your students are going to understand that as well. So how are we going to notice that? How are we going to calm ourselves? How are we going to manage it? And when you do something like that, which I did, you take a deep breath and you come back 5 minutes later and you sit down with your son and you explain to him how dangerous that could have been. You give him a big hug, you tell him how much you love him, you apologize for raising your voice, and you move on. Because right now, this is about all of us being in the same boat. And I think that's one of the things that I find challenging about a lot of what's happening, is that we just can't come up with any sort of consensus as to how we can be moving forward. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we're all suffering grief and loss in many different ways, whether it's our not being able to see our grandchildren, not being able to be face to face with our students, not knowing what to tell our own children, not knowing what to do for ourselves, not liking to wear masks or the face mask when you're going into the grocery store. All of these kinds of things are happening, and the grief cycle and the loss cycle is a scientifically proven cycle that all of us go through. And as we go through that, and as we're beginning to look at the new year, it's important for us to begin to understand where we are in the process, and also to think about that when we're dealing with our students, because they're going to be dealing with it as well. They're going to be dealing with things, and they're going to be looking at how things have changed in their lives and how things are going, and it's going to make a very, very difficult, if we're not empathetic to the fact that they're going through some different things, it's going to be very, very difficult for us to help them as we move forward. You see, I'm making mistakes right now with my slides. I'm trying to read Eleanor's comment. Traditional school day, does it have to be lockstep 6 hours a day? Eleanor, I agree with you 100%. I think we've talked about this on the show before, is the fact that the education system was created at the turn of the 20th century to prepare us for the Industrial Revolution. Most of what it does right now is not applicable to anything that, or a lot of things that we need in education. What it's really applicable for is a daycare system so that people can go to work. And so, you know, the question of whether or not we can do this online and get kids through a traditional school day that we spend 6 hours doing, if we can do it in 2.5 to 3 hours online, and I think the answer is absolutely yes. The problem is that the parents either need to be online working or they need to be physically at work. And so then what do we do with the kids in that regard? I think the idea of moving kids forward based on their age group makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. You know, you've got a 6-year-old that can do, you know, math at an 8-year-old or 9-year-old level. You got a 6-year-old that can do math at a 4-year-old level. Why should those two be in the same math class? None of this stuff makes sense. But the really exciting thing, and I hope that as we continue to have these conversations and we continue to move forward, we can figure out new ways to do this, because I don't think we need a 6-hour day. I certainly don't think it's good for the kids. I certainly don't think that teachers need to be in that situation. I think we can do it in less time. But then we need to work with community organizations to find places for kids to go. So I've made the comment before, you talk about the educational achievement part that we need, the math, the science, the reading, the writing, and those kinds of things. But what also about being able to take care of yourself, financial information, being able to balance a checkbook, understanding debt, being able to do your own laundry, make your own food, being able to understand relationships, SEL. There's all kinds of educational components that are if they're addressed at all in the traditional education system, it's very minor, but they could be addressed. They could be done by the Boys and Girls Club. They could be done by the YMCA. We could have kids in different situations like that. Obviously, again, right now, what we're dealing with in that situation is transportation. And that's another area where people are really concerned about how do we keep people safe. So these are all excellent questions, and I hope these are the questions. I think the one thing that would really, I would find really disagreeable would be if and when V-Day comes and we have the vaccine, we went back to our traditional education system completely. And we just said, okay, everything's back to normal. Let's just go back to what we were doing. I think that would be very, very difficult. Yeah, bring back home economics. Heidi, I had home economics when I was a senior in high school, and I quit because it was too hard. I actually dropped out and I became an office assistant. But the one thing that I had over all of my college buddies was that I knew how to cook for myself. And by the second year of college, I had a complete advantage over all of them because I knew how to do laundry and I knew how to cook for myself. And those two things saved me a ton of money, and they really, really helped me in regards to what I need to be doing. Figuring out ways to work on your own vehicles, figuring out things that you could be doing in terms of other ideas. So much of what we used to do at school was completely geared toward the day-to-day responsibilities of taking care of oneself. And again, I'm concerned that we're not paying enough attention to the economic reality of what's happening right now and saying to kids, honestly, especially at the college level, look, it's going to be tough to get a job for the next 10 years. I've got to be realistic. You're going to need to figure out ways to make it on your own. You're going to figure, like for me, I made it through college by being a bartender. I was in the restaurant business for 10 years. And I always thought that if anything ever happened in my later in life, that I could always go back to that. And it looks like that's not even an option anymore. So where are kids going to get, to make $100 a week or make $200 a week or $300 a week to be able to at least pull their own weight until they get to the point where it would be able to help out. So our goal of getting back to normal, Heidi mentions, I don't think there's no benefit to that. We understand that the world's changing. We know one thing for an absolute certainty is that every company, every industry, every single owner of capital right now is focused on robotics. They're focused on robotics and figuring out how to take the human component out of the manufacturing, out of retail. All the stores here, I've mentioned this on the show before, I live in Portugal, in Europe. All the stores here that I frequent, during the lockdown, did an amazing job of setting up the kiosks where you can check yourself out. So half of the kiosks that used to be manned by or peopled by people are now electronic checkouts situations. We know the Amazon store is coming, where you basically just fill up your cart and you walk out, and then somehow it takes a picture of everything and charges your credit card. The idea that these kinds of jobs are the jobs, especially for our kids, and again, we're talking about the economic disparity between the haves and the have-nots, the top 50% and those who aren't in that top 50%. Those kinds of jobs, truck driver, for example, they're almost to the point where they can automate truck driving. That's a job across the middle part of the United States and a lot of other areas that provides a really good middle-class living for families, and that's going to no longer be around. And so our goal as educators right now, not only to recreate the education system, but also to help our students understand what's important and talking to them about what's going on and talking to them as we go into this new year. And especially, so many teachers have told me that they were they were glad that the pandemic hit in the spring of last year, because they had already had a chance to develop healthy relationships with the majority of their kids, and that transferred into their online learning. This year, most of us are going to get a brand new set of kids, all of us in higher education. Obviously, I just got appointed as an adjunct professor for National University for their teacher education program. And I will be meeting a group of students that I've never met before. And I'm going to need to really, really focus on paying attention to how do I create effective relationships with these students and connect with them where they are as we go into the classroom. And it depends on where you are in the education environment, but that's going to be the same for everyone. And figuring out how to connect with them. Here's some questions that we can talk about. Here's some things that we can do in the first couple of weeks as we begin to ramp up the educational part of it, but thinking about them, talking to them about these ideas, really understanding what they need and so forth. And then also communicating with the parents. Even if you're in the higher education situation, I know my sister and brother-in-law have 3 college-age students, and they are all, at this point, starting off the fall, supposedly going back, but they're expecting them to come home as soon as possible. So communication, even at the college level, back to the home environment and talking to them about what's going on, finding out more about the kids, asking questions about how do I motivate your kid? What are some things that I can do? Here's some things that you can do, ways that you can help your kids stay on track and stay engaged. These are all things that the research has shown since March and even through summer school, that the more we engage with the students, the more we engage with their families, the more likely they are to show up in class, and the more likely they are to be willing to come and join us there, even if they're not the greatest learners. That idea that they feel like it's more about them than it is about their test scores or it is about our paycheck. This is the time to really reinforce all of those things and make it important for them to understand that. If you're teaching online, and any of you, these are some tips for you, for your tutors out there as well. You can use these kinds of things as ways to keep the kids engaged, to make sure that they're doing that. I tried earlier, although I wasn't able to do it, and you're going to notice that a lot of students are much more comfortable with the chat room than they are with online communications and actually talking in a Zoom meeting like this. But you can also do breakout groups where you can set them up and help them to do those together and work together to get them talking, to get them connecting with each other. Heidi has another point about tech needs to be overhauled too. I think that's tremendous. I know right now that we don't need smart tech. We need to teach that teaches us like idiots. Tech should be used as our real needs, not the needs of a consumer or a capitalist agenda. I agree with that 100%, Heidi. And I think a lot of people have found that just using simple resources, even things like YouTube videos and things like that, because you go out there and you're not recreating the wheel. A lot of these companies right now, teachers are complaining so much about all the free offers that are out there, because what comes after a free offer is everybody's trying to sell you a platform, an online meeting space, an in-classroom organizational thing, anything like that. It's just crazy. But you can go out there a lot of times and just find videos that people have done on particular subjects. And I just found a new online thing. It's $20. It's $50. Actually, if you sign up through Quartz, which is an online resource that I look at, but it's called Curiosity Stream, and it's an online streaming of thousands and thousands of documentaries and nonfiction educational programs that are online. It's $20 a year, and they have this tremendous dinosaurs, science, all kinds of things. Curiosity Stream is a fantastic online resource. And so we can go the way of like Khan Academy, and we can find ways we can go out and have other people other than ourselves explaining difficult concepts to our children, and that we don't have to pay anything for. So I agree with you. I think that's a really important thing that we need to find out. Eleanor's mentioning less standardized testing. I think standardized testing is about to get blown out of the water because of all this. I know the ACT and the SAT at the college levels are being taken less seriously, and I think the standardized test is at least for the next couple of years, is going to, they're not going to have an opportunity to do it, I wouldn't think. And so the idea of being able to do it from a distance perspective doesn't make sense, because the kid's sitting there with the book open. You're not going to really be able to test it. So at least we'll have a bellwether at the end of this period of time to look at standardized testing and say, did it really make sense? And again, we may be able to wash our hands of that completely and get back to the idea of education being about learning instead of about memorization, which it has been, and has been more and more over the last 20 years. more about memorization than it has been about learning. When it comes to connection before content, obviously this is the driving point in terms of doing that. The first 5 and last 5 of every class, less is more, talk less, don't do as much as you need, as you need to do. But if you're meeting with your students online, you're doing an online video, keep it short, keep it sweet. Think about the first 5 and the last 5 being about them, talking to them, asking them questions, encouraging them to write, encouraging them to think about themselves, encouraging them to express themselves in some positive way. Depending on the age of your students, the see, hear, feel, do charts, this is a great way to start a new class or a new school year, to ask students to write down what they'd like to see. What do you want to see in your class? What do you want to hear? What does your class sound like? What's it feel like? What do students do in your class? College students are just as apt to fill these out as anyone else, and you build this big database of what they want. And then you also do the other thing, which you set up the database of what they don't want. And that helps you set classroom norms, whether you're in person or online, for that, and can help them with that. Facial recognition, this is going to be really important when we think about the mask right now, because so much of our expression comes from our mouth. I know a lot of teachers are, especially young grade teachers, are looking at doing plastic face masks, or a face mask that at least allows the mouth to still show. And if you're going to be in a face-to-face situation, that's a good idea. But it's also good, too, to talk about and encourage, and go find a video. You can find it online. It's not something you have to do. It can just be something that you put in a sidebar if it's a class that doesn't deal with these kind of things. But recognizing facial expressions from the eyes, because the eyes truly are the most expressive part of our face. And helping kids to realize that's going to be a very positive SEL thing for them going forward, and helping them be able to realize that and do that sort of thing. I mentioned before, talking in future tense, creating routines, doing things to help them to see you lead by example, and to be patient. This is something I was reading today in the smartclassroom.com, which is a fantastic website. The gentleman that runs that does some great articles. But if you're teaching in a mask, these are things that most teachers probably do too much of anyway. But talk less, model everything, and encourage independent learning. So cut our talking time down, less, model everything you want to do, whether it's online, showing a video of how to do it, having a resource for them to look at, something that they can do, and then encouraging them to do it. Get them involved in the process as quickly as you possibly can. Oh, that's a good font change there. See, once again, another mistake in the sizing of my fonts. But teaching online, making sure that you're reminding and reinforcing everything that you're doing. Remind the student of the date. Put the dates on every one of your postings so that students can find them if they're not going every day, or they're coming in once a week, or they might just be gone for a couple of days. Set it up in a 1, 2, 3 format. If it's more than 3 points, if they need to think about more than 3 things, it's probably more than one lesson. Make sure that there's links to everything you want them to know. And then, as I said before, finding the video overviews that can help you, so that you're not constantly thinking about you having to do everything. And I think teachers have a tendency to want to be completely responsible for the learning of their student. And because if you're online, or even if you're in face-to-face, but you're not able to engage the way that you used to, it's going to be more important to be putting the emphasis and the impetus back on the students, and helping them to realize that they're responsible for their own learning. Talk about that in other countries, and where public education is not as wonderful even as it is in the United States, and talking about the realities of students in poorer countries who are trying to figure out how to raise themselves up and to do these kinds of things. We are all experiencing trauma, but so is the rest of the world. And that's the rest of the world where there are war zones, where there's poverty. I was reading the other day, and it breaks my heart. There's 10,000 starvation deaths a month in Africa, young African children, and they're basing that on the inability to get the crops to market. There's a lot of starvation in these countries. And talking to kids about these mental health issues, obviously you don't want to tell them that it's not a big deal, but you want them to understand and to know that we're all going through this, and that we're going to work on this together, and bring that togetherness part, bring that part of it back to what we're doing in education. for all of us, because it's absolutely critical and so important that we do that. So I'd like to open the floor for questions. I haven't, Teddy raised his hand, so we had one question, but I'd like to hear from you. Heidi, I'd like to hear from you actually, as we begin to close this kind of, I loved your, whoops, let's see if I can unmute you. I don't know why that's so hard for me to do sometimes.
Yeah.
You there?
Yeah, hi.
How are you? Thank you for joining our conversation today.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's been interesting for sure. One of the first few conversations I've had really, getting ready for school. So
Where do you teach?
I'm in New York City. I teach art in a high school.
Okay. Well, that's why you got such a positive attitude. You're one of the good teachers of art, and some of the things that a lot of people have tried to give up on over the years, but you're still holding on, which is fantastic. How are things in New York City?
It's interesting. Everybody's pretending like we're going to come back to school, but the plan they have in place for us to come back part-time says that if 2 or more students have any kind of symptoms that look like COVID, then the whole school shuts down for 2 weeks. So it's kind of a funny situation where we're still acting like we're going to come back, but I'm pretty sure at the last minute, my prediction is that we're going to be online. So it's a funny situation. It'd be nice to just have the resources now to plan online learning and just, move ahead with some concrete ideas. So.
Yeah, I don't think that's politically feasible right now, because parents just don't want to hear it. They're all hoping that it's gonna, somehow that it's gonna manifest itself, and that the students will be at school. But I don't think anybody wants to step up at 3 or 4 or 5 weeks before the year starts and says, you know what, this isn't gonna happen. So
right, yeah,
I don't think anybody wants to do that.
Especially the younger kids. I don't know how we're going to do online learning while their parents are going to work their 2 part-time jobs or 2 full-time jobs or whatever they normally do. So, childcare collectives. I know Alexandria Cortez had a childcare collective kind of brainstorm session somewhere in New York City. I think that kind of thing would be really useful for parents. I'm not a parent of a student right now, but I know everyone's worried about this.
Well, I think what we've talked about on the show before, and my wife and I here in Portugal have done, is that we hired a 17-year-old who is learning online. She is a young Portuguese girl who's working her way to college, but she's learning online because the schools are closed. And so she comes to our home for 2 hours a day and works with our kids on some not remedial, but my kids are 4 and 5, so they're not doing a lot of stuff. But I think what you're going to find is that there are going to be more and more people out there looking for someone like that can come into the home and then bring 4 or 5 families from either the community or from the apartment building or whatever that have kids, to be able to hire someone like that so that you can diffuse the cost and so forth. But I think it's absolutely critical that we come up with something like that, very, very quickly if we're going to be able to pull this off.
And even, there's a lot of people who are unemployed right now. I know a lot of people who are also teachers, and they would be the perfect people to organize. It seems like an obvious kind of answer, a community-based kind of co-op or something. And I think it could be pretty feasible. You don't have to charge too much if you have 6 or 7 kids. It all adds up, and it could be supplemental learning or kind of supervising in some way. In New York City, we have, it's been a half-assed attempt, but something called Open Streets, where they closed off some of the streets with the idea that people could just be outside and be socially distant. Although I've heard it wasn't really kind of followed up on so well. And now they've expanded that to call it open play streets, where they're supposedly going to have arts and crafts and some obstacle courses set up with equipment and something else. But again, I think it's an idea and not really being maximized on. The politics just seem to be standing in the way. Really, I think is going to be community people stepping up and doing exactly what you said,
We have to solve this problem. I think, you know, one of the things that I learned from Katrina and looking at what happened in New Orleans is that, you know, expecting the helicopters to show up with the white tents and coming up with a vaccine and science to do that and so forth, we have to do this on our own. So thank you very much for being with us. We do the show every week at the same time, so I hope you'll join us again.
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other comments before we go? Anybody want to raise a hand or unmute yourself? Anybody? Teddy, you got anything to finish up with?
I really enjoy your presentation this morning. I guess on my end this morning here, but I would like to see more folks join us next week. I've been here, like you said, since the beginning of March, and I always find something insightful to at least keep myself optimistic in terms of what's going to happen this semester. But like I said, you know, if folks can join us more frequently on a more weekly basis, that would be great.
Well, I tell you what, man, I think we're starting to get more people back. You know, we were 30, 40, 50 people at the beginning, and then, you know, the summer, everybody just took a break. So like Heidi was saying, a lot of people are just getting back. I think we're going to be surprised. We're going to get the crowd will be back, and then we'll be going forward. Thanks as always, Teddy. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Eleanor, Hillary, Jay, anyone want any final comments?
I think
Eleanor?
we're at a very exciting crossroads of life, and we need to take the opportunity to break the rules and do what needs to be done for kids.
Good. I like that. That should be the motto of our show. Thanks for being with us. I hope I see you again. Hillary, anything?
Thank you
Hillary?
so much for doing this. It's so nice to hear from others that are outside of my campus and to hear different perspectives on it. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you very much. Please join us in future weeks. We'll be here every Wednesday. Look forward to it. Karen, anything to say before we go? Whoops.
I happen to blah weird week mentally myself. So sometimes it's just good to hear that other people are muddling through as well.
Everyone is. Everyone is. And we take happiness and hope in that, I hope. Thanks for being with us. Katie?
Oh, no, just to echo what everybody else said, thank you, and I hope you feel better, Karen.
Thanks, Katie. Good luck.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. We have a CB Lawson. Are you there? I know you came on late. Maybe not. All right. Hey, thank you guys. I appreciate you being here. Thank you for all you do for the kids in your care. You are changing and affecting the future. We are going to get through this, and teachers are going to be a huge part, as is education, and in the recovery of getting things back to whatever normal is going to be. But thank you for all you do. Your boots on the ground. The work that you do is exciting and important. And like Eleanor said, I think we have an opportunity to break the rules and do something special. So if you want to, please join us next week, the same place, same time. We'll be here again talking about these kinds of issues. And the mic is always open in the Connected Classroom. So please join us and tell us what's on your mind. I look forward to seeing you all then.